Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. Now, I have a smaller review for you because I've been using these for a few years, right? Now, oftentimes you see the Peltor range guards and that kind of stuff in like very like large corporate-y chains. Like you'll see them in Bass Pro, you'll see them at like a Wally World or freaking. When we still shopped at Dick's, you'd see them at Dick's, frickin' Academy, Gander, all kinds of little places like that, right? Well, not exactly little, but you get it, right? And a lot of people will look at this, they'll see a fairly cheap price tag on them, they'll be like, 30, 40, whatever, you know, roundabout in that range. And they'll sit there and be like, that can't be all that good. Now, I am absolutely a person that got these because I invested an ass load into everything else. Because the main thing that I needed was a set of good ear protection as far as just like headphones were concerned. That would, you know, kill sound and that kind of thing. But if they also happen to be a good set of electronic ear protection, I would, you know, I would have something more to say about it. So over the last few years, I've been using these a lot. Now, big thing, right? Do they actually protect your, you know, your hearing is good? Now, I reviewed the Sport Tax a while ago, a long while ago, and I said, you know, they protect your hearing pretty well. These actually do a better job than that, depending on like what weird angle you ended up in and that kind of stuff. Eventually, just because of the nature of the little earmuffs themselves being like a harder, less pliable plastic versus like a rubbery texture, I guess, is where I want to go with that. Every once in a while they'd come unsealed and, you know, some of that loud sound would go straight into your hearing. Now, what I do have to say that's very pleasing about these individually is that these cost about the same as a Sport Tax did way back when, and they seal significantly better. Right, in that these are actually a little bit pliable, so that whether or not it's real cold, and that was a big thing about the Sport Tax, is that if it was real cold, the actual earmuffs themselves would get really rigid, and that's where you get a lot more unsealing and that kind of stuff. But whether or not it's cold or warm or whatever, these would actually stay sealed. They adjust in a very traditional way, which a lot of people are used to and that kind of thing. And what they have over the Sport Tax before is that there's a little bit of padding up in here. Now, for those of you that run out to like ranges and that kind of stuff to where all you're doing is plinking and that kind of deal, this right here doesn't mean a whole lot, right? To where there's a little bit of padding underneath. It doesn't mean a whole lot because you're going to whip the stuff on, you're shooting for a certain amount of time, you know, you pop them off and that kind of stuff. You're not wearing these all day for 8, 10 plus hours, especially when it's real cold outside and you're using these to kind of warm your ears too. Actually, when I teach class a lot, I almost hate taking these off because the second that you take them off, it's now cold as shit and the wind and all that other stuff. And of course, a little bit of sweat had started to build up in there too. So the second you take them off, it's, you know, and you're sitting there shaking like a chihuahua in the AC. Point is, though, is that, you know, these are actually a little bit pliable so that they seal in real good. And wearing them all day isn't taxing. It's not taxing in that, you know, I don't feel the band on my head. You know, and there's a lot of people that would buy, you know, the Sport Tax, for instance, and then go get something aftermarket to pad this out. And there's other, like, cheaper electronic ear protection that would have a similar band up over the top, but that's got similar to the Sport Tax and how they were less pliable, like sort of that hard shell, real cheap leather that is almost like not having any padding at all, which does kind of suck, right? So that's sort of a big deal, especially if you plan on wearing them all day, if you're taking a class, or in my case, I'm on ranges all the time for long periods of time, and I gotta have them on, especially, for instance, in like a vehicle class or something that I was teaching. The one day that we recently did, I lived on that line the entire day. I could not come off at all because everything was relay based, and we're constantly rotating people in and out, so I had to live out there with these on. Now, whether or not these were comfortable was a big deal, right? Because if it's just sitting there and it's just a hard shell top headband on your head, that sucks. It does. You know, especially if that's going over the top of a hat now. And just something as simple as that. Like, it gets you the feeling that it's just pressing on your head over, you know, a whole day's worth of doing it, and you walk away with a gigantic headache. I'm really glad that isn't the case with these, especially at the particular price point. Now, a couple other features that are actually really nice about these. Number one, both of your batteries go into one ear, and you don't have to undo like cups on the inside by pulling those out, which is actually pretty nice. The con to that, however, though, is that if you just let them sit on a loading table and it's just getting dumped on and that kind of stuff with rain, you could lose the seal in them really fast. And what also does kind of suck about them is that if you make enough contact with these, like if you smack, you know, the side of your head into like a fetal position enough or whatever, right? If that makes enough contact, you hear that, and that's just this starting to come loose and that kind of thing. So what I consider these right now is at the very second that we get into the fall-winter cycle of training where we're outside in the rain all the time, these are gonna die, right? But with that said, generally speaking, that doesn't happen. I've had 3 sets of these, right? So I'm rotating through one a year, which $40 once a year is not really all that bad, especially considering my friggin' ammo budget. And even then, I don't think it's that. I think it's like 30, 35, something like that. But point is, though, is that once a year is really not that big a deal, especially if I'm using it all year. So, yeah, kind of sucks. And when they start to go out, you really know it because you get, you know, weird radio station in your head. But I will say this. As far as activation and deactivation, that kind of stuff, it's just one that's hooked up to both sides versus both being independent. There is a tactile on-off to where you can tell if it's on or off when you put it on. A lot of you have put these on before to where you put it on your head, you turn them on, you hear the boo-doo-doo, and okay, it's on. And after a certain amount of time, and this is a big complaint that I had on the Sport Tacs, after a certain amount of time, these will auto shut off, which is great, because there are a lot of times where I'll finish teaching a block, I'll have these on forever, I'm directing traffic, that kind of thing, we get into a discussion, I'll whip them off and they're still on, you know, and then I'll come back to them like 8 hours later and the next day, and they're not dead because they automatically shut off, and that's great. Far as battery life and that kind of stuff is concerned, I don't even really know, but I get a decent amount of life out of these because I've absolutely hit the auto shut off on each set of this ear protection several times, and it would just keep rolling. What I would end up having to do, especially with the amount of range time that I have, which is a lot, it's 2 sets of classes at 4 days each a month, never mind my individual training, never mind the fact that I come out and do a lot of YouTube specific shooting where it's, yeah, I'm training in that kind of stuff, but this is specific to particular things I want to highlight for that video, right? So, you know, you end up spending a lot of range time doing that, and I'm changing batteries every 3 or 4 months, which doesn't sound like a lot until you consider how much time on the range that is with these on. Does that make sense? Because let's say that it's a low hour count day for, you know, like a set of 4 days, like I'm doing pistol 1 and 2, right? On average, including the night shoots, it's about 12 hours per day. That's a lot. When you stack all 4 of those together, multiply it by 2, and then all the individual stuff that I do as far as YouTube and individual training and that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of time, and I'm still changing them out every 3 or 4 months, which isn't too terribly bad, and they take a set of AAAs, and those are fairly affordable in it of themselves, right? So as far as just like, I'm using this specifically for ear protection and that kind of stuff, they work out pretty well. Now let's talk about the mics. The mics are great because unlike the walkers, and that's the last set of Ear Pro I did a review on not too far back. Actually, it is a while ago, but that's the last set of ear protection that I set up. or did a review on, like when you turn them on, right, like you can hear the birds and that kind of stuff. With the walkers, it was like the bird was where the camera is right now, even though I'm facing this way, I'm facing that way, I'm freaking 15 yards from here, and it feels like the fucker is right in front of me, right, and I can't tell where it's coming from. What's cool about these is that you have a good sense of direction as far as where noises are coming from. And that's really important to me personally, because it isn't just, you know, it isn't just being able to hear people talk and that kind of stuff. It isn't just being able to talk to people. With my job in particular, and that's teaching folks how to shoot or defend themselves and that kind of stuff, I have to be able to hear things and where it's coming from. Like, for instance, it's a small example, but it is an example to where if I hear someone starting to insert or do a reload on like a handgun, I'll pull up my most recent example, right? Dude's starting to do a reload, and you can hear that the reload itself is kind of sloppy. It's likely that he's doing it down here, so you hear that little bit of a juggling motion, and then you hear the slide drop on an empty chamber. That's a teaching moment, and I know where it comes from, right? I can go right to where it comes from. I know where it came from. I could holler at him before he starts to shoot. It's like, hey, that didn't strip around. And then he goes, well, yeah, it did. And I was like, nah, it didn't. And he's like, well, yeah, I inserted the thing. Bet. And then he goes and presses it on the empty chamber, and he's like, oh, shit. And it's like, okay, well, here's how I heard you from all the way over there. Here's how, you know, I could tell this and that and the other, and that's a teaching moment, and I could develop that from there. Never mind like safety shit and that kind of deal. So I have to know where stuff is coming from, and it's important to be able to tell where things are coming from. That's why it's a big, big, big plus in the Peltor Range Guards little camp there. Now, again, as a set of, you know, I use this for my individual practice. I use this to go to classes with and that kind of thing. This mostly fits the bill. Now, the reason why I say this mostly fits the bill is that there are a couple of things that this is not very good at. Number one, prolonged exposure to wet weather. Now, as far as prolonged exposure to the elements and that kind of stuff is concerned, I'll tell you what, I go through a set of these once a year, and they die about the same time every year. Right, out in the Tennessee, Kentucky area, during our, you know, fall or winter cycle, about 3/4 of the way through it, these die. The electronic components, that is. Like, I start getting, you know, static and radio and weird radio head shit going on, and then of course I got to shut them down. It's like, okay, these are dead, or after a while they just die completely. That's obvious, right? The seal on these actually kind of sucks, right? You can see I don't even really have to get like a close-up on it. You don't really see rubber O-rings or anything like that really sealing this cap onto here, and once you start getting enough moisture in there, this is going to die, right? So there's that. Now, how often does it die? Like I said, once a year I gotta switch them out, right? Because I'm constantly exposed to rain, and really, when exactly, I can't really tell you. But I would say roundabout 3/4 of the way through the fall and winter training season and that kind of stuff for us. And again, it's being exposed, you know, twice a month, roundabout. I'm outside training for a set of 4 days worth of training, 2 different classes, for instance, like pistol 1 and 2, and then rifle 1 and 2 that month, right? On average, each day is around about 12 hours. So it's those two combined, plus the individual training and YouTube stuff and all that other stuff. So I'm outside in the wet a lot, and about 3/4 of the way through that season, the electronic components in these will finally give up. Now, me personally, spending a set of $35 to $40 on a set of ear protection that's, you know, that is going to die on me. I know it. Once a year. You know, some of you may want to go up to a set of contacts or something like that. Me personally, this does this job particularly well, so I don't really, it's like, okay, I'll just replace these with those. And again, if the electronic components die, I still have the ear protection portion of it, and it's not like that goes out. You can't like make wet weather make this stop. You know, it'll still protect your hearing and that kind of stuff. It's just a quality of life bonus from being able to hear better that dies, right? So, I mean, really, there's that. To me, having to replace this once a year is not really that big of a deal, honestly. I mean, I replace batteries on everything that I use, except for handgun lights for some reason, because they stay on longer or something. I don't know. I change those out basically twice a year. But everything else, it takes a battery I replace once a year anyway. Batteries, you know, when you start to buy them all and replace everything, they cost around, you know, they will cost as much or more as these shit. So realistically speaking, that's not a big deal to me. But here are the things that I won't recommend this for, right? I won't recommend this for like duty use, right? If it's training, practice, you know, you're going to a class, you run outside and you know, you're going out and developing yourself, or you're going to classes, like I'd said before, this will do the job. Yeah, I've had these die on students and that kind of stuff before, but typically speaking, the people I have this die on are the students of mine that I can't really get rid of, right? Like guys that just come out over and over and over and over again, really abusing the $35 a month Patreon system. You know, I've had these die on those students before, but then they go without the audio portion of it. They're fine. I got to talk a little bit louder, no big deal. And then they replace them. It's no harm, no foul. But the hookups for these, as far as like OBSCOR helmets and that kind of stuff, it sucks. If you're trying to throw these underneath the padding and a mitch, that's also rather difficult. It's kind of a pain in the ass to get the strap system underneath and have that all hooked up, you know, like people used to do. It's not impossible, and it's also not incredibly uncomfortable. It's just kind of a pain in the dick, really. And there's better ways to do it now. So I really, especially because, actually mostly because of the issues with the seals, right? The fact that there really isn't any as far as your battery compartment is concerned, and the fact that wet weather, especially constant exposure to wet weather, will kill these. I'm not going to recommend these for duty use, but you know, kicking around at the range, going to training classes, individual practice, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, these will work, and they'll work longer for you than they'll work for me, likely, because chances are you don't spend as much time on ranges as I do. I'm a realist. I understand that, because, you know, add up the hours, right? Like a typical training day for me is the day, right? And there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 of those a month, on top of the classes, on top of YouTube stuff, right? That's a lot of time to be outside, and around about this time of year when it starts to get wet all the time, that's a lot of exposure, right? So chances are it's going to work for you longer than it has for me. And there are probably a bunch of you that are just kind of like, dude, I've never had a set of these fail on me, and I've had them since the first run when they came out. I got you. I actually thoroughly understand that, because you're not beating on these as much. You're not, you know, whipping your head into a freaking a fetal position or whatever, or getting your neck caught up weird, or whipping them into the back of your trunk as often or as repetitively. I get it, you know. So even still, it's not really that big of a deal. And biggest thing, especially for the guys that train a lot, the auto shut-off feature is amazing, and I'll recommend that all day. So just something to consider. A little bit of a polarizing review on there, because for a lot of people I'd recommend these two, and for a lot of people I'd absolutely would not recommend these two. I'd be like, yeah, dude, get a set of contacts. Just way better altogether. So is what it is. You can draw your own conclusions from that. Again, our training season is still up. It's running. It's good to go. Our November 2 through 5, we're doing rifle 1 and 2. We have a few people that are setting up to come out. I got a soldier coming out here that's getting trained off of your dime, because you guys provided a whole bunch of money for it. So if you guys want to come out and get some training before it gets really shitty outside, I would recommend it, because it's November in the Tennessee/Kentucky area versus December, January, February. So If you want to come out and do that and that kind of thing, she's already asking you what you want for Christmas anyway. Give her a reason to actually, fund something that you'd actually do. That worked for a lot of guys around Father's Day when I went to Paisley, Florida. Speaking of Paisley, Florida, we are going back in January, Rifle 1 and 2. We got a few names signed up for that, so for those of you that want to come out and get your ass whooped in January when it's actually nice for like 2 days a year, come out and we can go do some stuff there. Of course, we have training all over the place. We are continuing to go all over the place. I'm getting ready to set up a bunch of different places, and, you'll see the schedules update and that kind of stuff as things go. If you want to train with us and not pay full price all at once, you can jump onto the Patreon link that's in the description below. Sign up for $35 a month, and you can come out to as many classes as you'd like to, so long as you're signed up as a $35 a month guy. And if you just want to help out as far as, YouTube stuff or, getting soldiers trained up for nothing, because that's where that money comes from, you can absolutely, pitch in whatever for that. It's all greatly appreciated. It goes directly back into those guys, and it's very much appreciated because we continue to do stuff. High round count stuff and that kind of thing, a lot of it would not be possible if it weren't for you all. So there you go. But with that said, if you want to check out the Facebook page and that kind of stuff, or buy a hat from us, again, links for all this junk are in the description below. I'm done with the plugs, and remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.